Cluster 8 of the January 2026 New York State Biology Regents Exams. We are focused on questions 33 through 36 and reviewing how to score these. So this cluster focuses on baboon evolution and has fairly extensive information here. It has a long reading passage about the DNA evidence used to create this map. Shows a map of Africa, where these different baboon species are, where they migrated to, where they live, etc. So you really need to use this information extensively to answer the questions in this cluster. You also have a map of the biomes of Africa, the desert, savanna, deciduous woodland, etc. It also tells you a little bit about what these biomes are like. So that's important as well. Then we get to the questions 33. Which line of evidence supports the claim that African baboons share a common ancestor? And so if we look at the choices, changes in the DNA affect the skull shape over generations. That's not a wrong statement, but that doesn't give us evidence about how they share common ancestry. Number 2, skulls of modern baboons are identical in groups A and C. Okay, that doesn't give us information about the common ancestor of these African baboons. 33, changes in the DNA originate in one location. Okay, that makes sense. If they originate in one location and we trace those DNA changes, that might be information that they all evolved from a common ancestor in that one location. Or 4, longer facial fur resulted from DNA changes in groups A and B. And this is only focused on certain baboons, groups A and B, and so that doesn't give us the information about the common ancestry of these African baboons, all of them. So the answer here is 3. Give yourself a point if you got it correct. 34, what evidence explains how evolution of baboons result from an environmental factor? When we look at the choices, what we're going to see is they all have an environmental factor, right? That they're rainforest community, tall trees, diverse environments, desert sandstorms. So we have to use this map along with the species name from where they live to kind of analyze, do these statements make sense? The facial hair of P. papilio best protects it in deserts. So we would go back up here, find P. papilio, and we'd see, oh, it lives here. And then if we look at what biome that is, it's over here in sort of the savanna area, or maybe the deciduous woodland over right in here. That's not the desert. And so that's what makes this first choice wrong. So you have to do that for each choice. But what you're going to find is there's something wrong with all of them except for 2, P. kindai. Okay, that's the one that we see right over here. What we see is that lives in this area where you have many different overlapping biomes. Okay. And so that's diverse environments. So the answer 34 is 2. Give yourself a point if you got it correct. Some more information about ticks and how they affect baboons, and they're bad for them is what the reading will say. We have a graph showing how many times they were observed grooming each other and how many ticks were found on those individuals. The data looks all over the place, but luckily they've given us this trend line, which sort of gives us an overall pattern to the data. What we see is the more groomings, the lower the number of ticks, which kind of makes sense. So the question is to describe evidence from the graph that supports the claim that grooming increases the baboon's chance of survival. So that makes sense. And I think this bottom choice in the scoring guide is probably closest to what you may have answered. If an African baboon receives fewer groomings, okay, down this side, it's more likely to have ticks, which makes it more likely to be exposed to these diseases. Or it could use the opposite. The more groomings there are, the fewer ticks, which would result in lower levels of infection, allowing for higher chances of survival and reproduction. Okay, so that's how you would answer that question. If you have something along those lines, +1 for question 35. Question 36. Which statement provide evidence of how an environmental factor could cause a change in gene frequency for the likelihood of social behaviors in baboons? So again, you need to sort of read all of the choices and figure out what's correct and what's incorrect. And so which statement provides evidence, explains how the factor could cause a change in gene frequency? So we read all the choices. When average rainfall increases, increased grooming decreases the probability of passing on genes. That's incorrect. It's the opposite, right? Decreasing, increased grooming would increase the chances of passing on. So 36, number 1, that's incorrect. When average rainfall increases, increased grooming increases the probability of passing genes to the offspring for the likelihood of participating in social grooming. Okay, for 36. What's wrong with this? Give me a second. Okay, so look here, we have to look at this. Ticks prefer dry environments. So when we're analyzing these answers, it took me a second. So increased average rainfall would not be selective pressure. It would be decreased rainfall. So that's what makes 1 and 2 definitely wrong. So now we're choosing between 3 and 4. When average rainfall decreases, okay, increased grooming decreases probability of passing genes, or when rainfall decreases, increased grooming increases probability. Okay, 36. Question number, or item choice 4 is correct. When there's less rainfall, there's more ticks. So therefore, increased grooming, increased probability of passing genes. Choice is 4. Took me a second there, sorry. So +1 if you got question 36 right, and that wraps up this cluster.